Today we're going to talk about custom formatting deviations in MS Excel. Have you ever had to calculate deviations or net changes in MS Excel and wanted to make it visually more presentable so that when numbers are going up and it's a positive sign, we want to show it by a positive up arrow, and when numbers are going down when they're remaining flat, we want to see a red down arrow or a flat line? Well, there's a very simple way to do this with custom formatting. Even though we can use conditional formattings, because there are colors and icons that are set that we can use, there are rules that we need to manage, and that might get complicated. So custom formatting is a much simpler way to deal with things. On this sheet, we're seeing Apple prices for ranges since to March 2019 to 2021 in December. And we're also seeing the 50-day moving average of the prices on each certain day. So on the 18th of March, we have $47 for the actual close price, and the 50-day moving average as of that day was $41. Now, every time that we have a price that's above the 50-day moving average, we want to see a positive up arrow, green. And whenever every time it's below 50-day moving average, you want to see a down arrow, that's orange. We've done this through 5 different ways for this display of the data, and we're going to go through it today. The first method is when this price, the close price, is above the 50-day moving average, we're going to see just an up or a down arrow. That's green for good news, red for bad news, and flat for no change. The second method, we're actually seeing the percentage changes next to the up and down arrows. The third approach, we're seeing, okay, there's a 9% change for an increase in price, but we're seeing a flat line. That's because we have put ranges. We're saying if the value net changes between 10% and -3%, we're going to treat it as there's no change. If it's above 10%, we're happy and we're seeing an up green arrow. And if it's below -3%, then we're seeing a negative. We're announcing that as a negative, and we're seeing a red down arrow. In the fourth method, we're seeing there's a space between these numbers. So that's just a display of numbers. That's how it's changed, and we're going to show how we can explain how we can edit this in custom formatting. And in the last option, we have made it more dynamics. We have put upper limit and lower limits so we can actually change and make this 7% and make this one 1%, for instance, and we can see how these arrows are actually changing. So it allows us, give us more flexibility to do it via using formulas rather than using custom formatting. So there are several steps that we have to perform. One is to actually get these arrows. Another way is the colors. So let's go to the Practice tab and actually perform this. From these columns, all we have done is we calculated the net change. So it's basically how much the prices move relative to the moving average. In the last column, we have implemented a formula so that we can actually put upper and lower limits, and we'll go through that later. Let's do the first method. Under the first method, we just want to see the up and down arrows. So let's see how we're getting the symbols. There's 2 ways to get these symbols. One is to go insert symbol, and then get the symbols here. And another way is actually using the unichar function. The unichar function returns the Unicode character that is referenced by the given numeric value. And the number is the Unicode number that represents the character. For the up arrow, this character is 9650, and for the down arrow, it's 9660, as we're seeing the formula. And in order to get these values, and for the flat, it's 9644. And doing a simple Google search, we can get these codes of where these codes are coming from, just using the unichar and the Unicode that correspond to these symbols, and we'll be able to get those values through a simple Google search. And here's a sample website, for instance. But then we have to copy paste these symbols as values. So Control-C, Control-Alt-V as values to get these values here. And that's what we've done here. The next step is to get the colors. There are 56 color index properties in Excel. One way is to actually type in open and close square brackets, color green, color red, or we can actually put the color code that corresponds to those 56 colors in case we want to choose different colors. And if you hover over the Microsoft website, the Microsoft documents, there are guides there that we can see the color index values and the colors and the codes that correspond to those colors. 3 corresponds to red, 4 corresponds to green, and 46 correspond to orange. In our case, we want a specific orange, so we use orange color 46. Let's format this cell under method 1. Control 1 to get to the custom formatting, go to custom. So we want to format this. First, we would have to copy paste this value. So Control C to get the symbol. Let's go back to this there, Control 1. Let's go to custom. Then we've got the custom formatting. So inside the brackets, Control V to get the alt, to get the symbol. In this cell under the type, there are 3 arguments that goes here. First argument is for how the positive numbers are formatted. Then is how the negative numbers are formatted. The third argument is how 0 is formatted, and the fourth one is how text is formatted. Now here we don't have text, so we're just dealing with numbers. So positive numbers, negative numbers, and 0 numbers. Well, let's leave it at that. To get the value, select it, Control C. Coming down to the cell itself, Control 1, get the custom formatting. And then seems that it didn't capture that. So the first one is positive, we're going to bring it back, but let's say we're on the negative, quotation mark, Control V for down arrow, close, semicolon, and then we have to do for how zeros are formatted. Let's click OK. And then we have to bring the up arrow, Control C, Control 1. It's reading as flat because right now we're saying anything that's positive is blank, is just leave it as blank. But now quotation mark, open quotation, Control V, copy paste the up arrows and the down arrows. That's for positive, this is for negative, and now how zeros are formatted. Zeros are formatted with Control C, get the Control 1 to get the format cells, the custom. That's how zeros are formatted. Open quotation, Control V, close quotation. So that's how. So if we go Control C, Control Alt, Shift, Control down arrow to select the region, Control Alt V to bring the paste spatial, and Control and copy the format. Now we're just seeing up and down arrows. But how are we going to introduce the colors? Let's bring the colors. Control 1 to get to the special format cells and custom. And we put the colors in open and close bracket. Open square bracket, color green, close square bracket. Open square bracket, color red, close square bracket. For orange, you want the special orange. So open square bracket, color 46, close square bracket. So now we're seeing the up arrow. Control C, Shift Control down arrow to select the region. Control Alt V, and then we copy paste special the format. Great, now we're seeing up and down arrows. Exactly what we had under method 1. So now let's see how we can introduce the numbers. Shift Control down arrow to select, Control C to select the format and copy it. Control Shift down arrow to select the region, Control Alt V, and copy the format. And now this method is similar to that method 1. Now let's add the numbers. So let's go to the cell, Control 1. So now we're using this format. But now we want to introduce the percentages. So now we just type in the 0%. This is how we want the number to look like. So green 0%, red 0%, and the color orange 0%, and the symbol that we're using. Click OK, and we can see that there's a number and a symbol. Control C, Shift Control down arrow, Control Alt V, copy the format. And we're seeing that exactly the same that we had before. But let's look here. This was a negative number. Actually, this value is below this value, but it's actually showing as a positive red. Let's go into cell, Control 1. We want this number to show as a negative. So we want it to be in parentheses. We put parentheses around it. So now Control C, Shift Control down arrow, Control Alt V, copy format. And hey, we're seeing the negative numbers in parentheses, and that's what we expected. Let's go to the third method. Shift Control down arrow, Control C to copy the format. Shift Control down to select the region, Control Alt V, copy the format. Now this looks exactly the same as this one. But now in this case, in the third method, we were having a flat line for 9% because we were putting conditions. We want any number that's below 10% and above -3% to show us a flat line. So let's see how we can implement this. Control 1, get into the pay special. So now we want to add our conditions. The conditions are implemented via square brackets also. So open square bracket for positive numbers. As long as the number is greater than 10%, 0.1, close bracket, then we want to see it up going up. As long as the number is open square bracket below -0.03, then we want to see a down red arrow. Otherwise, it'll default into orange. Let's click OK, Control C, Shift Control down arrow to select the region, Control Alt V to paste special, copy the format. Okay, now we're seeing these 9% and 10% because they're not actually 9 and 10%. They're between 10% and -3%, so we're actually seeing them as oranges. This one is showing as a minus because it's negative, and this one is showing as a 0 because it's actually positive. Now, under the fourth method, we said, how can we introduce a space in between these numbers to make it more presentable when it's presented? So even though we change the width of these column, it's always at the beginning and at the end. That's how we see the numbers are showing. The symbols at the end of the cell and the numbers at the beginning of the cell. Okay, so Shift Control down arrow, from the third method. Shift Control down arrow, Control C, Shift Control down arrow, select the region, Control Alt V to copy the format. So we have this. Let's go into the cell, the first cell. Control 1, enter the formatting cell. So now we want with some space. One way is to put space in between the arrows, behind the arrows, inside the quotations. But a better way is actually behind the quotation, put a star space. And what this does is it copies and repeats the space until it gets to the end of the cell, and then it puts the arrow. Same thing here, star space, same thing, star space. Okay, so now it's implemented it. The beginning a number, the end is the arrow. Control C, Shift Control down arrow to select the region, Control Alt V for paste special, copy the format. Now we can see the numbers at the beginning and the symbols at the end of a cell. It's more presentable. So under these two methods, method 3 and method 4, we just changed the display. We had a conditional formatting between 10% and -3%. We want to see a flat line. And anything that's larger than 10%, we want to see a positive up arrow. And any number that's below 3%, we want to see a negative red arrow. That's down arrow. Okay, so what if we want to make this more dynamic? To be able to enter the upper and lower limit, the user is able to enter the upper and lower limit, that we don't have to input it into the custom format itself like we did here. Then we can implement it through a nested if or a function inside the cell, and then custom format that value based on it being positive, negative, or 0. Let's see how we can do this. So here's the percentage that we have, which is basically the close price divided by the 50-day moving average. If it was positive, then we had an up and down arrow. Now we're seeing that if this net change is below the 10%, and there's an AND function here, above -3%, then we're putting a 0. That's when we want to see a flat orange line. Otherwise, if this value is above 10%, then we want to see the value 1, which is a positive number. That's how positive numbers will be formatted with an up green arrow. Otherwise, we put a -1. That's how negative numbers are formatted with a down red arrow. So this cell will become a combination of 1s and 0s and -1s, as we're seeing here. So then Shift Control down arrow to select the region, Control 1. So now we can just go back to the original custom formatting that we had for the first method. which is green up arrow, red down arrow for negative numbers, and zeros will be an orange flat line. Voila, and then we did that. That's what we have. And here we can change it to 5%, for instance. And then we can see these arrows will become more dynamic. So we can change it. We can change this one to 11%. We can change it to 20%. And then we can see we're always having a down or a flat line, which means that it's never been above 20% of the moving average over that region. So let's put it back at 10%. So this will make it a bit more dynamic. And just to show one more thing here, this upper limit is text. It's actually not upper limit text, it's actually custom formatting. Control 1, we actually put upper limits in quotations, star, space, to make sure the upper limit is at the beginning of a text and the numbers are at the end, the percentage at the end, and that's how we formatted. The positive numbers in here, Control 1 to get to the custom formatting, again, upper and lower limit, but because there's a negative number, we're putting it, they're just how we have put the positive numbers are formatted as the first argument, the negative numbers are formatted as the second argument, lower limit. And if you want to put zeros, then put semicolon, quotation, lower limit, colon, space, star, space, because then it repeats the space until it gets to the end, and then we put 0%. And that's how 0 will be formatted. So if I put 0 in this case, this is what we're seeing it. If I put 1, that's how we're seeing it. -3, that's how we can see -3 will be displayed. And these are numbers, so we can use those numbers as inputs in these formulas without having to manually do any data manipulation. Great. So now we went through custom formatting values in 4 different ways: by showing the percentages, by just showing the arrows, by integrating the colors that we talked about, there are 56 color index properties, by bringing in the symbols and actually putting some space between the symbols and the values, the numbers, by integrating conditional formatting into it. Conditional formatting and colors both will be integrated into the square brackets, or we can introduce it and make it more dynamic through nested if functions. Hope you enjoyed this session. See you next time.